So I read Radiant Black since we were talking about that. Book one, so it's like 12
it's
issues,
12
I
issues,
believe,
yeah.
as I was looking through there. Yeah, so
Can I ask a question
sure,
first?
go ahead.
Is this the one that like crosses over? Like there's another Radiant? Like
There's like a Radiant. They did like a bunch of spin-offs, like Radiant Pink and Radiant Red, and I think.
But the main story
Is
like
Radiant
the
Black.
ongoing is Radiant Black?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have to read that other stuff?
No.
Like,
It's
okay.
just like they're introduced in there, and then you can read like their other.
I got you. Do you mind if I
Well, that's the
flip through
thing.
this?
Yeah,
or
go
do you
ahead.
need it?
Flip through. I may need it, but that's okay. It's all good. You know, with the idea of Radiant Black is it's almost like Image Universe, you know, type things, or, you know, this is creator owned or whatever, but it's almost like they're trying to do a take on almost like the Green Lantern Corps or something, I feel like. But in this case, there's this like little black hole that pops up, but it pops up to a couple of people, and it gives them this superpower. It gives them superpowers, but the powers are slightly different depending on what black hole you got, you know, type things. But it basically allows you to have this kind of suit that is almost symbiotic or whatever type of thing, and it basically can have you do different things like maybe teleport or strength or some type of energy absorption, these type of stuff. And so in this case, though, it's trying to give it that feel of, hey, we've never had really superheroes before, or in a world, you know, really not necessarily with superheroes. What happens if somebody gets these powers and it's just your day-to-day people, you know, type things that are getting them. Now, there's an overarching story, you know, here too of, I think, a battle for, you know, out there in the universe, and these people are just kind of pawns in it, and as well as there's some other guy who has powers similar to that who's trying to take theirs, you know, stuff going on there. But it does a pretty good job with, I think, the characterization is probably the biggest thing throughout there, of trying to build up some characters, trying to make them feel like, you know, they're normal people that are inheriting, you know, certain power type things. They give good backstories, I think, for each one of them. At least in this first 12, you've got like 4 different ones, you know, that have the, you know, that I guess would be part of our hero crew, you know, a yellow, a purple, a black, blackish blue, or whatever you want to say, and like a red, you know, and just kind of how they meet. It's kind of like getting the gang together type of thing, you know, who's all got it and who meets what, and you know, how do they get together, and that type of stuff, and trying to defeat a certain foe, at least for now,
Gotcha.
you know, with a bigger story that's yet to come. The big thing in this, you know, from a twist perspective, is that the character that you think is probably going to be your main hero ends up, something happens, and then kind of his best friend then inherits stuff. And I'm sure there's deeper things to go, especially if you've read the back of this, where they were talking about, you know, some of the ideas that they were pitching, you know, originally, you know, and stuff. You almost get a feel that the guy who originally inherits, their original idea was not necessarily with this guy, but their original idea was that somebody that was the hero turned dark, you know, type things. It was ultimately the big bad guy. It happens to be, though, that character's name was the same name that they used for the gentleman that starts with the power here, and then ends up, you know, losing it, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So, you know, it almost seems like, is that a foreshadowing maybe to come? I don't know, you know, if something, or maybe they just totally scrapped that idea, you know, in general, and just happened to use a similar name, you know, type things, or the same name. But, you know, you almost get a feel here towards the end that there is perhaps a little jealousy there, even though he's trying to say, no, I don't, there's not, you know, so.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because like Scott said, there's like 2 friends, and the one friend, they're like out drinking or whatever, and they're walking back, and the black hole thing appears, and the one friend grabs it, and he becomes it, and the other guy's like, well, I could have grabbed it just as easily. So there's a little bit of jealousy, and then one of the friends is kind of the one who doesn't have it. He's a little more kind of aggressive and outgoing and a little more risk-taking.
Yeah.
And the guy who gets it is a little
runs by
more,
the seat of his pants, you know, this type of thing.
But the guy who gets it, he's more conservative and a little more, you know, tightly wound or whatever, you know.
And probably a little bit more ethical in general.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
So, I mean, those things kind of go hand in hand. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And both the characters, I mean, the main guy who actually gets it, initially, like, you get a lot of his backstory. He's like a failed writer, and he, like, went out to, like, Hollywood to try and be a writer. Now he's back, broke. He's got all this debt. He's living with his parents, and he's kind of trying to put his life back together, but he's back in his hometown with his old best friend from, like, high school, and they're kind of reconnecting, and then this thing happens, and it kind of throws their relationship for a thing. But, I've read up to issue 30, so a lot of more stuff happens or whatever.
I believe it.
But, I think it's... a lot of people ask me, like, well, Invincible's over. What's the next Invincible? I think this is the closest thing to Invincible, just from, like, a narrative and character standpoint and all that stuff.
I would agree. I mean, there is a certain narrative that's going on here that is really, really well done.
Yeah.
Type things. I don't know if I'm a big fan of their. I think they said something about that. What was it? Every so many issues, they were going to have like this one-off that was done by a different artist, and be specific, about a backstory of somebody else,
Gotcha.
all this like certain standalone. I felt that was a little.
Well, that had one of those in there, didn't it?
It has two of them in there.
Okay, because the one is of the one girl. Is it Radiant Pink?
That's right.
Who's like the
Red
streamer or whatever?
Okay, so you got pink/purple or whatever I think she's purple, but maybe it is pink. But yeah, she was a streamer, but it also was kind of about the guy that's yellow as well.
Yeah, correct. Because they kind of how they met.
And then you've got the one of red, where they go back and they talk about.
Oh yeah, because her husband was like a gamble addict or whatever. Yeah,
but that kind of takes away from this bigger narrative that they had going on, of things, especially your main, or I say your main two, but your initial two characters, as well as whatever the hell thing they were trying to fight, and that type of stuff. But
gotcha.
I don't know. There's some world building going on there, and obviously they're trying to pace it, accordingly. I don't know that something there with how they've got it. It doesn't. It's not immediately grabbing, type stuff.
Totally.
Even, Invincible, I don't know if it did either, but there was something about Invincible and its nostalgia / just in your face type stuff that really grabbed you pretty well. And then throwing these things in there as quick as he did, somehow making it work. I don't know how. I do agree with you. It's probably the closest thing to it.
It's not as good as Invincible.
But it's still not.
I agree with that 100%.
Type things. But I got to say, the art and stuff in here is pretty damn solid. Except for here again, I think that may be part of the problem is because they do.
Yeah, there were like 3.
Yeah, they do jump around in some artists.
There were 3
villains
in 12 issues.
Yeah,
what's interesting is
so for me personally, I felt that a little jarring. Normally that doesn't get to me, but I don't know if it was that the styles were different enough.
See, I thought the villains were fairly similar in style to the main guy. Like I didn't feel it's like a huge departure.
I see that is so different in that style.
Yeah,
and then there was another one that was back in here too, where it's just quite a bit different than the main person. I felt like too.
Yep.
That I just felt like it was a bit jarring to some things. So
did you ever read The Cow? COW?
I did.
This is the same writer. He weaves the cow into there. So it's like an old TV show that these guys have watched, and they're like talking about like they're making a movie of it or something. Who they're gonna remember? There were some little references to that cow. That was an actual different comic book series that came out.
That's been forever. I don't even remember the cow.
Yeah. So anyway, it's somehow tied into this world. Like it's a shared universe in a way or something.
I don't even know if that thing ever ended. I mean, it ended, but I don't know if it ended on purpose or if it just stopped coming out. Like I don't know that it had an ending.
Yeah.
But I do have to say that the pacing I feel like is good.
Yeah.
In this type things, and I do feel like I say, that characterization, I do greatly appreciate it. There's some characters you like more than others. I appreciate maybe some of the throw-in type things that they do, especially with our one character who is a little bit more risk-taking, aggressive type things. But he has a certain, that certain slacker mentality, but yet trying to do some stuff. But he has some pretty funny lines, and whatever else. So I do think that there's a lot of good things in this. Mm-hmm. Maybe it wasn't quite as I think when I flipped through it and just looking at it, I felt like, oh, this is something I would really like. I liked it, but maybe not quite as much as I was really thinking I might when I first flipped through, just because it looks like it's got that type of stuff I like. Lots of world building, lots of witty dialogue, some a little bit of a sci-fi type things, this type of stuff in there, and it does have all that, but I can't quite place it where it's just like
It's almost like it's trying to go in too many directions.
Maybe that's
It's
it.
a
It
little
just
too
can't-
disjointed. If
it's
it can be
not
a little more
quite-
focused.
quite grabbing me either.
Yeah. Nope. It's solid, but yeah, it could
Yeah,
definitely be
yeah.
improved. So.
It's almost got the Scotty Young syndrome there or something. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like why I want to read, because I read in single issues. That's why I want to read in those to kind of get bigger chunks, because it is so going all these different directions. It really benefits from reading a chunk of it at a time, I think.
Yeah.
But,